Periodization for 400-meter sprinter. This program is designed for a 21-year-old male. He competes in the 400-meter sprint for Florida State. This sport takes place on an outdoor track. Runners start in a staggered position and race the entire course, which is one lap around, while remaining in their own lane. He competes 8 times a year. This year, he wants to increase his absolute speed as well as his lactate threshold. The biomechanics. The primary muscles utilized in this sport are the quadriceps, hamstrings, hip flexors, glutes, and calves. The glutes and the hamstrings perform the action extension and hyperextension in the hip joint, and the iliopsoas performs flexion in the hip joint. The quadriceps perform extension in the knee, and hamstrings perform flexion. And as for the ankle joint, the gastrocnemius performs plantar flexion, and the tibialis anterior performs dorsiflexion. So the track runner, he is at risk for many injuries. Here are some of them. Runner's knee, stress fractures, shin splints, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendinopathy, and IT band syndrome. And these are just some. There are many others, but these are some of the top ones he's at risk of experiencing. Exercise testing. So before we design the program, before we work with the athlete, he will have to be tested in a few areas. The first one would be a non-fatiguing test. So for an example, that would be like his height, his weight, his body fat by skin fold. They're taken not only to monitor his weight later on, but also because extra body fat can hinder performance in sprints. So in agility tests, we would do the pro agility test to test his speed and his reaction time when the race begins. The Margaria-Kalaman tests, that would show his level of power. The 40-yard sprint would show his speed. And then for anaerobic capacity, we would have him perform the 300-yard shuttle. Aerobic capacity, he would do the 1.5-mile run. And then for his flexibility, we would do the sit and reach, which would really show flexibility, especially in his hamstrings, which is very important in this sport. So here's an overview of the macro cycle. You have general preparation and specific preparation, pre-competition and competition. And we'll go into detail on each of these phases and the goals of each phase. The overall goal of this program is to increase his absolute speed and his lactate threshold. So during the general preparation, we want to build muscle, increase his aerobic endurance, and the focus is to increase his speed over a long distance in the competition. During our specific preparation phase, we want to increase his maximum strength, his anaerobic endurance, and his anaerobic capacity. Pre-competition, we're going to transition from the max strength that we had built and use that towards increasing his high velocity strength and power. And for his endurance, we want to maintain his speed and his anaerobic capacity for competition. And then during the competition, the program's built around the competition. So the goal is not really to build, but maintain power and speed without injury or overtraining. General preparation. So this phase would be considered the least sport specific. However, it is very necessary for growth in the sport. We want to have a good solid base to work from in the later phases. So here for the muscle, we're going to just be focusing on building muscle. And then we're going to focus on speed development and muscular and aerobic endurance. So for muscle hypertrophy, we're going to be doing core exercises such as squats, deadlifts, bench press, and then followed by some accessory exercises that can help. The ranges will be from like 6 to 12 repetitions, depending on the weight he's lifting, at 3 to 6 sets per exercise. We're going to want him to rest between 30 seconds to a minute and a half between sets, so he has enough rest to come back to the next set fully recovered. And about 4 to 6 resistance training workouts per week. And then the load is anywhere from 67% to 85% of his 1 rep max. A tempo workout, an example of that would be he would warm up for 1 mile at 6.5 miles per hour. Then he would increase his tempo for the next 3 miles at, let's say, 7.5 miles per hour. And it has to be a pace that is very challenging in order for him to be able to build upon. So he has to maintain that speed for 3 miles. And then when he gets to the last mile, he would go back down, a cool down for 6.5 miles per hour. Specific preparation. This training in this phase will become a little bit more specific to the sport. Instead of hypertrophy, we're going to use the muscle gained in the previous phase and put that towards max strength. We want to build his strength. And then for speed, we want to work on speed development and anaerobic capacity and his anaerobic endurance. So for max strength, we're going to continue with core exercises, compound multi-joint exercises such as a back squat, a Romanian deadlift, up to only 6 repetitions per set max. It can range from 2 to 6, and 2 to 6 sets per exercise. These exercises are at a much higher intensity, so he's going to need between 2 to 5 minutes of rest between to come back fresh. And we would drop the workouts to about 4 times per week. And his intensity for each exercise would be about 85% of his 1 rep max. So for the anaerobic endurance and his anaerobic capacity, we're going to include high intensity interval training, which is high intensity bouts of exercise with brief recovery in between. An example of this would be a 2 to 3 minute run of high intensity followed by 30 seconds to 2 minutes of recovery. And we want to keep his intensity to about 90% of his VO2 max. So anaerobic endurance and capacity workout during specific preparation. This training is focused on increasing his anaerobic capacity and endurance. Training to build anaerobic capacity will help him with his feet coming off the ground faster and more forcefully. This ultimately leads to less energy lost. The training for building anaerobic endurance is important to help the athlete sustain high-intensity sprints for a short duration. A workout we would do for building his anaerobic capacity would be, for example, a 1 minute sprint at 90 to 100% max heart rate, rest for 3 minutes, and repeat 4 times. Pre-competition. So the competition is getting near, so the volume of the workouts will drop significantly because we want to prevent overtraining. We want them to be as fresh as possible for the competition. So we're going to start focusing on maintaining his strength and speed. Workouts will use strength gained from the previous phase to perform high velocity and power exercises. So all that strength gained, we're just going to do them faster and with more power. Intensity of the workouts will remain about moderate to high. So the strength is to focus to transition from, like I said, the max strength to heavy power to high velocity power. This would be a time that we would include plyometrics. This phase will use plyometrics to improve the stretch shortening cycle of our athlete. This involves a rapid eccentric muscle action, stimulating the stretch reflex and storage of elastic energy. This ultimately results in increased force production during the concentric action. So in this phase, as far as resistance training, we're going to be doing multi-joint exercises, power snatches, power cleans. These are high velocity power exercises. Reps would be between 3 to 5 per set and 3 to 5 sets per exercise. The intensity would drop a little bit because these are high velocity exercises, so about 75 to 85% of their 1 rep max. And we would rest from 2 to 5 minutes between sets so we can perform the next set at our best. So speed maintenance. As the competition nears, the focus is no longer to increase his speed, but to maintain it with minimal training to prevent overtraining. So we're finalizing any less specific loading such as strength and power work This is the final phase of development, so a focus on the most specific qualities and competition demands are the primary focus. Workouts will be designed around the competition. Intensity will be low and only short duration training just before race days. Cross training will also be utilized to maintain the conditioning while helping with recovery. So an example of a workout to maintain the athlete's speed would be an 80-meter sprint, a 100-meter walk, and a 100-meter sprint. And he would repeat this about 4 times with 5 minutes of rest in between. So for the competition, we are in season. The program is designed around it with low to moderate intensity. So we're just going to maintain power and speed and deload in endurance. Volume will range from low to moderate, while the intensity will be pretty high. So with resistance training, the volume is low to moderate. There's only 1 workout a week involving resistance training. An example of this workout would be still high velocity power exercises like power cleans, power snatch, box jump, depth jumps. As for speed maintenance, the workouts on the track would drop to 1 to 2 times a week. We could also utilize tempo runs in here again. A typical workout on the track would be like a 100-meter tempo 10 times and 5 minutes in between tempos. As for the aerobic endurance and tempo in general prep, the goal of the tempo runs is to enhance our athlete's ability to maintain the exercise at a specific pace and increase his lactate threshold for later on. The intensity of these workouts would increase about 10% each week while monitoring to prevent overtraining. So it'd be like 1 tempo run per week for 20 to 30 minutes. The intensity would be at his lactate threshold, so we can build it. And then 1 interval intensity run for 3 to 5 minutes with a work-rest ratio of 1 to 1. So if he runs for 3, we're going to rest for 3. Runs for 5, rest for 5. And this intensity needs to be close to his VO2 max.